For some, paranormal mysteries are easily solved as either figments of our imagination or perfectly ordinary events. But for those more open to alternate theories, these simple explanations don't add up, leaving the mysteries unsolved. Number 5. It's often said that ghosts and the paranormal are attracted to locations with a history of suffering or tragedy. If this is the case, it's easy to see why the Real Felipe Fortress has so many haunting ghost stories. The fortress lies just outside of Lima, Peru, and overlooks the port there. For centuries, it's protected the people and ships coming in and out of the port, but one point in history is believed to be responsible for the majority of the ghosts that still hide there. In 1537, the Spanish set up the port of Callao, about 15 kilometers west of Peru on the coast of the Pacific Ocean. It would quickly become one of the most popular ports in Spanish America. The large amounts of silver and other materials that were being pulled out of South America left from this port. Naturally, that made it a popular location for pirates and privateers from Spain's rivals. Authorities in Peru first tried building walls to protect the port, only for them to be destroyed during an earthquake in 1746. Not long after, work would begin on a pentagonal fortress that stretched over 70,000 square meters. It was named the Felipe V of Spain. The fortress wasn't only the largest of its kind in Spanish America, but it was also impenetrable. The walls were so thick that even the strongest weapons launched from a pirate's ship could break through. It also had its own weapons, with 188 bronze cannons and 124 iron cannons that could protect the fort from every angle. Those sheltering inside the fortress had access to drinking water from wells, a barracks, and a hospital. When defended, there was little anybody outside the fortress could do to break in. The Real Felipe Fortress was built to protect Peruvians against pirates, but in the early 1800s, the people inside the fortress were defending themselves against the Peruvians. The Peruvian War of Independence began in 1809, and the fortress would play an important role. It was initially held by royalist forces who were loyal to the Spanish crown. The same defenses that had pushed away pirates prevented any naval attacks and forced the Patriot forces to launch an invasion of Lima by land instead. The fortress wouldn't fall, but those inside couldn't last forever. There was drinking water, but no way of growing or preparing food inside the walls. When the Patriot forces put the royalists under siege, there was also no way of getting food from the outside. Before long, sickness and hunger forced the royalists to surrender. The fortress has developed a paranormal reputation and has been featured on TV shows such as Ghost Hunters International. There's no shortage of creepy and disturbing entities that are said to exist in the fortress. The most famous of these is a woman dressed in all white. She's said to appear on the drawbridge to the King's Tower at midnight, singing a funeral melody. Who this woman is remains a mystery, though many claim that she was an entertainer from a highborn Spanish family who went to the fortress for protection during the war. Like many of those inside the walls, she caught a disease and passed away. Another less common story claims that the lady in white is a woman named Michaela Villegas, who is a mistress of the viceroy that ordered the fortress's construction. Other ghosts at the haunted fortress include that of a 2-year-old boy, seen wearing a sailor's outfit. Once spotted by visitors, he'll run and hide, leaving behind footprints in the dust before he vanishes into thin air. But not all the ghosts at the fortress are that innocent. Many visitors have reported seeing a soldier fall from one of the towers, only to disappear before he reaches the bottom. Those that go up to the tower feel the overwhelming urge to jump, a feeling that isn't felt at all in any of the other towers. The most haunted location, though, is the dungeons. Here, countless men were held in conditions so crowded that they were forced to stand. Boiling water would be thrown over them at random times, and most didn't last more than a few months before passing away. Visitors reported feeling cold spots, seeing shadowy figures, and hearing the groans and cries for help of the people that lost their lives here centuries ago. Number 4. There are stories from all over the world of roads that claim to be paranormal hotspots. Many tried to claim to be the most haunted road in their country, if not the entire world, but most have the same general stories surrounding them. What makes the Stocksbridge bypass stand out is that the hauntings began before the road even opened. The Stockbridge bypass opened in 1988, and it was a much welcomed road to the locals. It connected the M1 motorway in England to one of the main Transpennine roads which connected Sheffield and Manchester. For years, traffic through the towns of Stockbridge and Deepcar had been getting worse and worse, and it was hoped that this new bypass would help clear that up. But even before the bypass opened, it had gotten a haunted reputation. Stories started to come from construction workers, security guards, and even police officers that there were beings on the road that shouldn't have been there. Construction workers working late at night reported the sound of children singing. They couldn't make out exactly what the song was that was being sung, but it sounded like a nursery rhyme. Not long after these reports started to come in, a pair of security guards reported something even more eerie. It was September of 1987, and Stephen Brooks and David Goldthorpe were on patrol near Peroid Bridge when they spotted a group of children who looked like they'd been dressed in medieval-style clothing. They were dancing in a ring around a pylon at the side of the road, an area which was off-limits at the time. The man went over to see what was going on, only for the children to disappear. Peroid Bridge would be the site of a second haunting incident for these two men, and one that would stop them from going back to work. It was late at night when the security guards spotted a figure standing on the bridge. At the time, construction hadn't finished, so getting onto the bridge would have been difficult. They didn't immediately think this was anything too scary. They at first thought that it was a practical joke. One of the men drove behind the bridge and lit up the figure with the car's headlights. It was only then that they realized that this figure didn't have a head, and the light from the car passed through the figure before it disappeared entirely. The two security guards called their boss in a panic. He had never known them to be anything other than down-to-earth and sensible, but they were both hysterical when he arrived. They were still shaking with shock 24 hours later and asked if a priest could exorcise the road. The most famous story, though, came from a pair of police officers called to investigate. It was September 11, 1987, and PC Ellis and Constable Beat were on duty. The first thing they noticed was some shadowy figure on a painted box, but they eventually concluded that this was just a sheet of plastic in the breeze. Then the men felt a chill rush over them, and later described it as being like someone had walked over their graves. PC Ellis got the feeling that there was something standing at the side of the car. He turned his head, slowly at first, but when he spotted the figure, he moved his head quickly, and by the time he was facing it, it was gone. Then Beat began screaming that there was something on his side of the car. The figure had moved from one side of the vehicle to the other in an instant. Ellis described it as looking like a man dressed in 1820s clothing and staring at them. By the time he had focused on the man, though, it began to disappear. What makes this case so strange is that the two officers involved actually spoke to the media about their encounter and terrifying experience. By the time the road opened, there were plenty of ghost stories circulating, and more were added to the folklore when people began to drive on it. The most commonly seen apparition was that of a monk-like figure. He's been seen leaning against trees on the side of the road or walking along the road, the lower half of his body in the ground. Apparently, the road had been much lower down. There were many origin stories about this creepy monk. There were once monastic farms in the area, and some claimed that the monk had worked on one before he passed away. He was buried on unhallowed land, which was then uncovered during work on the road. Others claimed that he was a Catholic priest who passed away on his way to a secret mass. There were no records of any graves being disturbed during construction, but that hasn't stopped rumors. Once opened, there were a number of accidents on the road which only added to its haunted reputation. Authorities claimed that these accidents all had mundane reasons, such as speeding or overtaking in the wrong place. But some have reported almost getting into accidents after seeing figures appearing in the middle of the road. It's possible that not all of these accidents were the result of natural causes. Traffic cameras and other safety measures were put into place, which did limit the number of incidents on the road, but it hasn't shaken its reputation as being one of the most haunted roads in Britain. Number 3. The DeSoto Hotel in El Paso is often reported as being the most haunted building in the city, if not in the entire state. The location was once home to at least 3 entities and other unexplained activity. The hotel opened in 1905 as the Great Northern Hotel. A journalist going through the historical newspapers from the city found the odd mention of the hotel in articles, but it didn't appear to be the site of any major tragedy or strange occurrences. There were a few reports of people passing away in their rooms, normally due to natural causes, and police being called to deal with guests causing problems. On one occasion, a guest jumped from his room to the roof of a nearby building, wounding his ankle but surviving. Overall, the historical record tells the story of an ordinary hotel, which changed its name during the more than 100 years of operation only once. But stories and legends about the building had grown in the local community. By 2012, most of the hotel was being rented to long-term residents, with only a few rooms being open for overnight guests. But the large basement was only used for storage. It was here where the paranormal activity in the hotel was strongest. The cause of this paranormal activity remains a mystery, though some believe it was due to satanic worship in the area. One legend tells of a Satanist who scribbled the number 666 on the walls using his own fluids. A newspaper clipping from 1973 tells a different story. In this version, a man broke into a room and started to tear the place apart. When he was arrested, he claimed to worship the devil and started speaking in tongues. He cursed the police officers and their families. Whatever the cause of this strange activity in the basement, there's definitely something there. It doesn't like visitors and will pinch, scratch, and even bite people that enter its area. Visitors that escape unharmed report feeling very unwanted. Some have heard growling, which is described as sounding demonic in nature. Whether it's an actual demon or some other kind of spirit is debated. It's not the only entity that still resides in the hotel, though. Residents have often reported hearing or even seeing a teenage girl wandering through the corridors, only for the entity to disappear into thin air. According to paranormal investigators, she used EVP devices to give her name as Sarah. How she came to be trapped in the hotel is another unsolved mystery. The final well-known entity doesn't have a name or any kind of backstory, but has the distinction of being caught on camera. During one paranormal investigation, recording equipment was left in an abandoned hallway. A disembodied voice was heard saying, "Who cares?" Moments later, a shadowy figure emerged from one of the doors, only to disappear into thin air. It's not the only paranormal activity caught on camera at the hotel, though. DeSoto was visited by the TV show Ghost Adventures, who caught objects moving by themselves, including a heavy fan being knocked off a table in the basement. All paranormal investigations were stopped in 2022 when a fire tore through the building. It was unoccupied at the time, as it had been closed for renovations. Thankfully, nobody was hurt, but the building was heavily damaged, with some of the upper floors collapsing. The cause of the fire remains a mystery. Investigators concluded it was either an electrical fire or an act by an unknown individual. Locals believe it may have been paranormal in nature, though, and point to strange faces caught in images of the fire and the smoke that rose from the building. The majority of the building was saved, and there are plans to reopen DeSoto as a restaurant and hotel in 2024. Whether or not the ghosts that once called the building home still reside there remains to be seen. Number 2. The Black Nun of the Bank of England is a strange figure seen in central London and the Bank Underground station. The elderly woman will sometimes stop tourists or those out late at night near the old site of the Bank of England. She'll feebly ask if they've seen her brother. When the witness inevitably says that they haven't and look away from the woman for a moment, she disappears into thin air. The woman is Sarah Whitehead, and she's apparently been haunting the location since the 1800s. In the first 2 decades of the 1800s, fraud was a serious problem with Bank of England notes. New £1 and £2 notes had been introduced which were easy to counterfeit, as people didn't know how to spot a fake. A new law was enacted, making forging banknotes a capital offense, and many people still decided to take the risk. According to the legend of the Black Nun, Philip Whitehead was one of those people. He was a bank clerk who was caught forging banknotes in 1811. He was found guilty and received capital punishment. Philip had a sister named Sarah who was very close to her brother. He didn't want her to find out about his crime and asked a friend to take her to stay in another location during the trial. But when Philip didn't come home, Sarah was concerned. Nobody told her what had happened to him, so she went to the bank in search of her brother. The bank staff knew Philip didn't want her to find out, so they simply told her that he wasn't at work, but they would tell him that she was looking for him. This continued for a while, but someone told Sarah the truth. Sarah still continued her daily pilgrimage to the bank, but now dressed in a black dress and veil. Her outfit earned her the nickname the Black Nun of Threadneedle Street, where the bank was located. Sarah would ask if they had seen her brother. If she couldn't talk to the bankers themselves, she would talk to the customers. Some felt pity for her and gave her money. One version of the story claims that she accused Baron Rothschild that he was trying to steal her inheritance and owed her thousands of pounds. He gave her a half-crown, which she seemed to be happy with. Eventually, the bank grew tired of her and paid her to leave and never come back. Sarah took the money and wouldn't be seen again at the bank until after she passed away. Staff reported seeing her on the grounds of the Bank of England, inside the courtyard of the building. There, old gravestones made up a path through the area, and staff reported seeing her on her knees at one of the stones. Others reported her asking for her brother, something she still allegedly does to this day. When the bank tube station was built in 1900, Sarah's ghost apparently decided to make that home too. One station worker reported seeing an elderly woman on the CCTV cameras, long after the station had closed for the night. He believed she must have gotten locked in and wanted to see if she was okay. The worker found the old woman in a corridor. She looked up at him, then quickly backed down to the floor and walked off. The worker followed her, but she rounded a corner and disappeared into thin air. Other staff couldn't locate her on CCTV. Staff sometimes reported hearing knocking from the elevators after the station had closed for the night, and strange smells that could not be explained. It seems there may be some truth to the story. A man named Paul Whitehead, rather than Philip Whitehead, is recorded as having worked for the Bank of England and lost his life due to forgery. A Times newspaper clipping from 1828 reports a Sarah Whitehead going to court, where she claimed there was a conspiracy to defraud and poison her. It's also true that the crypt of the Church of St. Mary Woolnoth was demolished during the construction of the bank station. Where Sarah was buried isn't clear, though it would make sense for her to be buried here, near where she lived. The remains of those buried at St. Mary's were relocated, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Sarah moved with them. Number 1. The Rain Woman is a creepy painting that was sold multiple times, only to be returned by buyers who claimed that they got more than what they paid for. It eventually found a permanent home with the musician, but even his wife cannot stand the disturbing image. The painting was created by Ukrainian artist Svetlana Telets in 1996. She was a recent graduate of Odessa Art University and specialized in surrealism and abstract art. According to one source, her work was known for its use of dreamlike colors. It's hard to find examples of Svetlana's previous work, but the works of her students show the colorful art style that she was known for. So the painting she would become famous for was extremely out of place. Svetlana described it as being a bright and sunny day when she sat down to paint, with no plans of what she wanted to create when she started. Suddenly, she saw exactly the image she was going to paint. In the span of just 5 hours, Svetlana painted most of the Rain Woman. She described it as being like someone else had used her to create the painting, and she had a pretty good idea of what that being was. For 6 months before she had created the Rain Woman, she felt as if something was watching her and living in her home with her. This was the being that had used her to create the Rain Woman. The painting is of a woman from the chest up. She's dressed in all black with only her pale face visible. Her eyes are cast down and she has an expressionless face. She wears a black wide-brimmed hat. The body is a cloudy gray and rain pours off of the hat. Even without knowing the story of the painting, it's definitely creepy. After a few months of putting the finishing touches onto the image, Svetlana put it in the store to be sold. The woman remained unsold for years before finally catching the eye of her first buyer. The buyer was a businesswoman who lived alone. For some reason, she took a liking to the creepy painting and bought it. It was hung up in her bedroom, but it didn't stay at the new home for long. Only a few weeks later, Svetlana received a phone call from the buyer. She begged the artist to take the painting back, claiming that something else had come along with it. She told Svetlana that it felt as if there was someone else in her apartment with her and she couldn't sleep. Even when she had taken the painting down and hidden it behind a closet, the figure in the painting still walked around her home at night. Svetlana took the painting back and put it back on sale. The next buyer was a man who bought the painting and again hung it up in his home. The second buyer hadn't heard anything about what had happened to the first woman, but the story he told Svetlana was eerily similar. He would dream about the Rain Woman every night and asked Svetlana to take it back. When the painting was put up for sale a third time, it came with a haunted story. This time, the buyer was aware of the paranormal activity that had occurred the first 2 times the painting was sold, but he believed that he had seen the Rain Woman before, and he needed to purchase it. Unfortunately, he also got more than he bargained for. When he returned the painting, he said that he hadn't realized just how white the woman's eyes were, and he believed that if he kept it any longer, they would consume him. For the next 11 years, the painting went unsold. Svetlana said that she wasn't in a rush to sell it, and believed the right person would eventually come along. That happened after the painting was featured in a local magazine, and the singer Sergei Skachko saw the image. Skachko was on a flight when he was handed the magazine, and immediately moved to purchase it. He contacted the author of the article, who then contacted Svetlana and arranged the meeting. Within hours of Skachko having discovered the painting, he bought it. Apparently, he got along well with the Rain Woman, and it seemed like this was where she wanted to stay, but his wife wasn't as keen on the painting. According to one report, they had argued more since the painting appeared in their home. Their appliances would break more often, and something would walk around her home at night. Skachko would keep the painting hung in his office, but she would take it down when he was away, unable to put up with the entity that came with it. Who or what is haunting the Rain Woman remains a mystery. It's not even clear if the painting is haunted or simply cursed. For now, she seems to be happy in her current home, but buyer beware if she ever ends up on sale again. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.